welcome to our Vet at Eastern Information Night. My name is Daisy and I'm the Student Services Supervisor here at Eastern College Australia. We are delighted that you've joined us today to learn a little bit more about vocational education and training courses at Eastern. This evening, we'll hear from our Vice Principal, Dr. Jude Long, as well as our course coordinators for the Certificate 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology and Certificate 4 in Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care. At the end of the session, we'll be having a time for questions, so please put any queries that you have in the Q&A box on your screen. We'll be covering a lot of information in a short time this evening, so if your questions aren't answered, please connect with us. I personally would be delighted to chat with you about study options specifically for you, so please email me via the details provided at the end of the webinar or give us a call to make a time. Before I continue, just a couple of other things. Firstly, this session is being recorded, and also note that we'll be putting some helpful links in the chat as we go along, so keep an eye out on those as well. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jude Long, our Vice Principal. Thanks, Jude.
Thanks, Daisy, and welcome. It's great to have you join us today. As Daisy said, my name's Jude Long. I'm Vice Principal Academic of Melbourne School of Theology and Eastern College, and also what's known as the Director of VET. So previously I was the Principal of Nummunya College in Darwin, which was a vocational education college for Aboriginal Christians, mostly from remote communities. In that role, I came to see the great importance of vocational education and the flexibility that it provides for so many people. Well, we call it VET. It's not about looking after animals. What does VET really mean? VET is Vocational Education and Training. And it is nationally accredited training through an organisation called the Australian Skills Quality Authority. That's important because it's not like just getting an unaccredited certificate. There are standards that we have to meet, and there is also support available for accredited courses. Well, unlike higher education, VET courses focus much more on the development of skills than the accumulation of knowledge. Though, of course, you have to have knowledge, but the knowledge and the skills are always tied together. And unlike higher education, which in a sense is quite competitive, you know, you're always aiming to beat the other person and get a high distinction or a credit or something like that, VET is not competitive. It is actually just determining that you have the skills and knowledge to do the job that you're being trained for. So that significantly affects the sort of assessment that we have. And there are no major essays and no exams. So I'm sure that that is great news for many of you. Assessment is very flexible and it can include all sorts of things. So it might be observing someone listening if you're doing a pastoral care subject, or it might be writing a Bible study if you're doing Christian theology and ministry, or working with a student and being observed as you do that if you're doing education support. There are all sorts of different ways that we can assess how a student is going. And some of the things that we use are role plays, case studies, presentations, discussions, placements, short answer questions, journals, even things like posters or timelines can be assessment tasks. There is a lot of variety. And so that also then translates into how we teach. There's not an expectation that we're going to have a 3-hour lecture and you're just going to sit and listen, but it's very interactive. There's a lot of class discussion. There's practicing the things that the skills that you're learning and sharing the knowledge together. And you actually do a fair bit of your assessing in the classroom environment or in your placements. So while VET and higher education are very, very different to each other, if you are interested in going on to higher education, VET can also give you a bit of a leg up in that. So some VET courses will actually give you credit into a higher education award. So, for example, our Certificate 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology will give you the equivalent of 2 units into the Eastern Diploma of Arts or into a Bachelor of Theology at Melbourne School of Theology. And the other way it can help is that if you didn't quite get enough, a good enough enter score to reach the educational thresholds for certain degrees, then it demonstrates your readiness to study. And so if you've completed one of our Certificate 4s, that would give you eligibility to be able to do something like a Bachelor of Education. So that can be really helpful. And it can also serve as a really great gap year between finishing school, not quite sure what you're going to do next. It's not a waste of time, but can actually give you a bit of a start in something else. Now, while we don't really like talking about money too much when it comes to education, it is actually an important consideration as fees are going up all the time these days. VET courses, because of their nature, can actually be significantly cheaper than higher education courses. Some of our courses, such as the Certificate in Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care and our Education Support Certificates, also have Victorian government funding available for eligible students. So this is usually only if you have not completed a certificate or a qualification at the same or higher level. So if this is your first level of study, that would be one factor. And also maybe if you're unemployed. So there are some rules around that. There are special considerations for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I think given the current COVID unemployment situation and many people wishing to retrain to get jobs, there is a lot more support available through the government at this time. So I just wanted to say that at Eastern, we are really passionate about equipping people from all walks of life and all levels of academic experience or ability. We see VET courses as really important in preparing people for ministry in their churches, but also in preparing people for their vocations, whether that's in a Christian environment or a non-Christian environment. And so our courses in chaplaincy and education support are a key part of what we're trying to do here at Eastern. So you can find out a bit more about our courses. We're going to hear from our course coordinators, and I'm going to hand over to Stephen Andrews, who will give you some more information about the Certificate 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology. And I'll be talking to you again later.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be with you. I'm Stephen Andrews, and as Jude introduced me, I'm the coordinator for the Certificate 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology. Yeah, I'm really excited about this course and this training, I guess because of some of my past experience as well. I've served with my family over in Mauritius for a number of years, and we used vocational training there to help equip and train church workers and ministers and pastors. And I could see the value and the benefit of vocational training. And so coming back here to Australia and seeing this opportunity to do likewise has been really exciting for me. Going back a little further, I was involved in youth work in a church, and I would have loved to have had a course like this to complement, if you like, our youth ministry and young adults ministry. It serves potentially as a really good course to embed into a church internship program, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I guess some of the outcomes for this course is certainly that your walk with God deepens, that you fall in love with Jesus more and more, and that the Holy Spirit would be at work and active in your life. If you come to study with us at MSD Eastern here and do this course, then yes, we certainly want your walk with the Lord to grow. And so this course will endeavour to do that. It will provide opportunities for reflection and challenge, and that reflection and challenge will come out of the scriptures. So we'll spend a lot of time in the Bible reading different Bible passages, learning how to read the Bible and begin to apply that to our lives and to theological and ethical and ministry situations and contexts. So, if you want to study the Bible, then this course will certainly give you opportunity to do that. Also, as Jude mentioned, because it's vocational training, there will be a focus on skills as well. And so we'll be looking to sharpen and encourage different skills and giftings that you might have and to see you put them into practice. So there will be some activities that's done outside the classroom, and that'll form a part of your assessment as well. So it's quite practical in that sense. You can take these courses face-to-face. Wantirna, we'd love to see people enrol and get involved in February next year. But if Wantirna is just too far away, then we're putting this course up online as well. And so if you're somewhere around Australia, you're welcome to join us online. An exciting example of a country town using this course is Albany. Over in Albany, they have a cohort of 14 or 15 students from 5 or 6 different churches in town, and they all come together on a Thursday. And they have trainers over there. And if you wanted to know more about what that looks like, then we have another webinar recorded where Damon from Albany is interviewed. And we share in that webinar more about what this course can do in terms of a course that brings people together in a country town with a cohort of students, which I'm also very excited about. Some of the units, as you can see here, what will you be studying is a really good question. There are 9 units, 6 core units and 3 electives, and they're clustered together into 7 units. So the first one, I'll just run through these very quickly. Using the Bible, we'll actually be looking at the book of Philippians and some Psalms as a way of understanding the Bible and how to use that. God's story, we're looking at the big themes of the Bible from the Old Testament through to the New Testament, and particularly focusing on promises that God has made, and then promises that he has fulfilled that have come to pass, and of course some that are yet still to happen. So a really good unit that brings alive the Old Testament and how it relates to the New Testament. Knowing God, if you like, is a bit of introduction to theology. What do we believe? And we'll be looking at different aspects of Christian belief. Discipleship, we'll be looking at the Gospel of Mark, studying that quite closely, and things that come out of that, matters that come out of that, we'll begin to apply to our own lives and to our own discipleship journey. This unit particularly will focus on our relationship with Jesus and growing in that relationship with him. Telling God's story, well, that's about sharing this wonderful story, this wonderful gospel. And we'll be thinking about contexts that we do that in. We'll consider, of course, post-Christian contexts, Muslim contexts, all sorts of different subcultures here in Australia. You'll have opportunity to give that some thought. How do we tell God's story in Melbourne and potentially other places around the world? Well, Christian ethics, what a big question, and we'll just dip our toe into that in one of the units. There's so many issues that we're facing today, and Christian ethics gives us that opportunity to think about some really current issues and apply the Bible to those issues. And I think increasingly in our less Christian society, this issue of Christian ethics is becoming more and more important, isn't it? And finally, working cross-culturally and in healthy teams is, I think, a really exciting unit that allows us to think about, well, we're not on this journey alone. We're going to be serving the Lord in teams, hopefully, and thinking about team life. How does that work? How can I be a great team player? But then also thinking about diversity, perhaps on our team, culturally, gender, ethnicity, all sorts of different diversity on team, but then also in terms of the people that we might be serving and sharing the love of Jesus with. So that's a bit of a cultural subject as well, which I think really rounds off this certificate very nicely. So I trust that those units really grab you, I think it's a really well designed and exciting course in terms of a vocational training course. Really excited for it. Well, you might ask, what are some of the job outcomes? Where would this training lead me? I think one role, if you've done this course, would be certainly leading a small group. Now that might be an unpaid role, but there could be paid as well. There could be churches looking for small group coordinators or people to help them with training small group leaders. This course would certainly equip you well for that. Certainly any role with youth or young adults ministry, absolutely this course would set you up very well for thinking through issues and preparing you for that sort of ministry. And even going cross-culturally, you might have missions on your heart, and while travel's a little difficult at the moment, we're praying and trusting travel will open up. And this course will also give you some skills to taking the gospel cross-culturally, whether that's overseas or indeed even here in Melbourne. There's plenty of ethnic groups that we can approach and take the gospel to in love. And again, this course will prepare you well for cross-cultural ministry. And like Jude already mentioned too, having this course behind you will set you up really well for any profession, any career in the workplace, in business. And having this sort of background will help you live out the Christian life in your business or workplace context and be salt and light and a voice of proclamation in your workplace. So yeah, I think there are a number of job outcomes, whether they're paid or voluntary. I'm sure there's great usefulness in the life of the church for such a course as this. So thank you for listening. I'm happy to receive any questions in due course, either as we wrap up or via email or via Daisy. Yeah, happy to answer any further questions at any point. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Neil. Neil's a coordinator for the Certificate 4 in Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care. Thank you, Neil.
So I'll begin by, similar to how Steve-O finished off, I'll begin by who should consider the course. Basically, the course is designed for those who are or who aspire to be chaplains, pastoral carers, and spiritual care workers. If we think of chaplains, we're probably familiar with chaplains in schools and sporting clubs, but chaplains are also in hospitals, aged care facilities, factories, the police, the military, basically anywhere where there are groups of people. If we look at the pastoral care and spiritual care side, we can think of things like ministers, missionaries, religious education workers, and then we have other volunteer roles, such as support workers in churches and mission agencies. And so straight away you can see that there is some similarity with Christian ministry and theology. And so there's a possibility of actually doing 2 degrees. So basically, in summary, chaplaincy and pastoral care is for those, this course is for those who provide ongoing ethical, moral, spiritual, and practical support to people using a person-centred approach. I can't emphasise that enough. It's a people business. It's person to person. And in a sense, it's complementary to the role of the Holy Spirit in being a helper, in coming alongside and supporting people. It's also one of the few Christian ministries that's held in high regard by the general community. Now, if we think of the course itself, there are 9 core units and then 4 electives. And there are a number of electives that you can choose, but you need to do a minimum of 4. There's also a minimum of 100 hours in a supervised practical placement. And as Jude alluded to before, knowledge and skills are developed over time, but through a practical placement, you've got supervised mentoring where you can put your knowledge into practice and continue to develop your skills. The course is also designed to promote the development of self-awareness and personal identity necessary for effective work in pastoral and spiritual care. We can't begin to help others until we know what makes us tick and how we can then help others. Now, if we think of the course delivery, primarily we do face-to-face intensives. Now, this is for those that can possibly get a day off and come to an intensive. There are alternatives where you can do units online, but our preference is to have as much face-to-face contact with you as possible because we're in a people business. We're dealing with people. And so we need to show that in our delivery as well. However, there's a wide range of online materials that we also provide to support your training. We have a number of different trainers and assessors, and they all come with different backgrounds and extensive backgrounds, whether it be in chaplaincy, pastoral care, or the church. If we think of each unit, it runs between 4 and 14 weeks. So if we take it, all our training, it's designed to be done over 1 year. Now, some people need to take longer, and that's fine. So if we're thinking of doing it for 1 year, typically we're looking at 15 hours per week. Now that's just a guide. You'll be different because you have your own unique background, and what you've studied before, your aptitude, but that just gives you a rough idea. And so it's designed so that you can do this course while you're still working or have other commitments. And most people who do the course are either working full-time, heavily involved in the church, and sometimes both. So I hope that's just giving you a bit of a snapshot of what it's like. And I'd now like to hand over to Jude, who is going to talk about the Certificate 4 in Education Support. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil, and good to be back. I'm really pleased to be talking about the Certificate 4 in Education Support. This is a new course that is just starting, and we're going to be offering the course on the campus of Mount Evelyn Christian School, which is in Mount Evelyn, not surprisingly. We have been offering a Certificate 3 in Education Support for some time, but we've decided to offer this course because it addresses two specific needs. Firstly, while the actual skills and the practical components of the course will apply in whatever work situation you're in, the course will be delivered from a Christian worldview. It's going to help students grapple with some really difficult issues from the Christian perspective. As you work in education support, you are caring for some of the most vulnerable children. How do you think about issues like the issue of disability and being created in the image of God? How do we demonstrate the love of Christ to children who are perhaps a bit hard to work with? How does Christian schooling support all students? Christian schools attract a significant number of children with special needs because of their caring environment. And Mount Evelyn Christian School is actually considered something of a leader in this area in Melbourne. Many Christian teachers undertake special training and professional development in the integration of their Christian faith with their teaching. Until now, this has not been possible for the education support workers working in Christian schools. And the Christian schools have identified that this is an area they would really love support in, and love their education support workers to be able to do that very important thing, to be able to integrate their Christian faith into their role in the school. The other reason it's important is that government requirements for education support workers are actually becoming stricter. At the moment, the rules are a little bit vague, but many schools are starting to require their education support workers to actually have a Certificate 4 level qualification, not the Certificate 3 or some of the other short courses that used to be available. This means that currently people working as education support workers may be required to upskill in future. So this course is therefore valuable both for those already working in the area to ensure their future employability, but also for those who would like to start working in education support for the first time. I said that the course was being offered from a Christian perspective and delivered in a Christian environment, but the actual qualification is equally valid whether you're working in a Christian school or any school. It's a nationally accredited qualification. And I see that the slides just popped down again, but if you could pop the slide back up again with some of the core units, that'll help us think about what the course actually looks like. So the course involves the completion of 12 core units and 5 electives. We're going to be delivering the course face-to-face 1 day a week during school hours on a Monday at Mount Evelyn Christian School for most of the school year. It goes for about 32 weeks. The teacher for the course her name is Beth Smith, is currently working at Mount Evelyn Christian School as an education support worker, and she's been there for a number of years. So these units that we've got listed here are just some of the units, the core units, but you can see that they have things like supporting the behaviour of children and young adults. In particular, we're concerned about children with autism spectrum disorder, and so there's a specific subject on that. And how do you manage as an education support worker playground duty? So we're thinking about supervising students outside the classroom. While we have core electives that we have to do, the core units that we have to do, the 5 electives have actually been chosen by the education support workers at Mount Evelyn Christian School as highly relevant to that context and from their experience in working in schools. Thanks, we probably don't need that slide anymore. One of the requirements for the course is that students have to complete 120 hours of placement within a school. So while you're learning about education support, you're actually practicing in the classroom with teachers and with other education support workers. Mount Evelyn Christian School have very kindly agreed that they will assist us with this and with placements. But if, for example, your children go to another school and you want to do a placement in another school, that's completely possible as well. It's just a matter of making the arrangement with them. So this course is really ideal for those who have school-aged children and would like to be studying, getting a skill, but within school hours and with school holidays, and getting a skill in a job that can then be, once again, worked in school hours. So it's really an ideal profession for the parent of a school-aged child. It is a full-time course over the year, a bit like what Neil was saying before. While there's 1 day a week of classes, you probably need to be thinking about probably 1 day a week of placement. And then there are homework and assessment and reading and things like that between classes as well. It can also be done part-time. And so we can talk about that if that's the way you prefer to do it. That just obviously extends the time. We will only be accepting 15 students into this course for 2021. So if you are interested or you know someone who might be interested, please let them know. It'll probably be first in, first served. And we're really hopeful that this is going to be a very successful course that will equip many education support workers for the Christian schools. Sadly, it's a growing field. We need more and more people to support our vulnerable young people. So I commend it to you. And I'm just going to hand back to Daisy now.
Well, thank you, Jude, Stephen and Neil, for your insights into some of the specifics of our vocational courses. So now that we've heard from some of our trainers, we also want to hear from some current students, Jerome and Diana, who commenced their Certificate 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology earlier this year. They're a married couple doing their course together as they prepare to serve in cross-cultural mission. So we'll go to that video now.
Both modules were facilitated by Stephen Andrews. His way of presenting the information has been very considerate and filled with a prayerful heart to encourage us to wait upon the Lord to understand the scriptures.
The subject, interpreting theological data, gave us great insight on how the Bible came together as a book and what to look for when interpreting a particular Bible passage. It can be used for personal Bible study or for a larger group. We worked through some fantastic literature and resources, and after only 10 short weeks, we were able to confidently write a well-researched study on a Bible passage.
The second module we studied went through the book of God's Big Picture. It joined the Old and the New Testament together and put the whole Bible in perspective, showing that everything is pointing to Jesus, how he gave his life to save mankind, and how this was all determined from the beginning of time.
Our personal faith has grown as we marveled at God's wisdom, his patience with mankind, and realized his deep love for us. Seeing how God had planned it all and how he is so much bigger than us strengthened our faith and encouraged us once again to go and tell people about Jesus.
So we would like to encourage you to take up the CMT courses in future. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I hope you found that encouraging video, and as you may be aware, we do have students from many different cultural and denominational backgrounds scattered all over Australia and the world. In fact, students can study online from anywhere for most of our courses, as well as on campus right here in Melbourne. Our campus is in Wantirna, in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and is equipped with on-site parking. We have beautiful views overlooking farms from our chapel, as well as spacious areas for students to connect, for classes, community events, our chapel, as I already mentioned, in conferences. So in a moment, we'll watch a short video that gives you a little insight onto the campus here in Wantirna, as we can't be there together tonight. So we'll go ahead and go to that video now. video gives you a little bit of a sense about our campus, as we can't all be there together at the moment. So now that we've covered some focused details on our courses and the campus, we'll zoom back out a little bit and talk about student life. And this is one of my favourite things to talk about, as being a student at the college. Just a few years ago myself, not only did I love being in class, but also the college community that surrounded me was truly part of my own learning and transformation at the college. As you may know, we have the unique opportunity to be on campus and in community with Melbourne School of Theology. We have weekly chapel services, a number of social events throughout the year planned by our student leadership team. There are also additional opportunities for practical learning on top of placements as restrictions to continue to lift, to join our outbound trips, which are local, nationally in other states, but also internationally, to go on short trips and serve the local church in that way as well. We're also hoping for the opportunity for a retreat for those involved in the Christian ministry and theology units, to go away together just outside Melbourne for a few days to learn in a different environment, spend some time in reflection and in prayer together later in the year. We also hope, as well as our weekly chapel service, to run weekly devotions for vet students, and we're looking at doing that on a Thursday next year. So as well as these aspects of student life, there is also the student support. So our trainers are here to support students throughout their study journey, checking in, making sure they're on track and understanding their classes and content. But we also have a student support worker who is available to all students, whether on campus or online, who's available to meet with students for pastoral and personal needs. And she's trained in spiritual direction as well. Okay, moving on to the practical question that you're all probably wondering. What is the application process? How do I get to be a student? Well, firstly, first step is to submit an application online. So these applications are found on the website by clicking any of the Apply Now buttons. So we'll go ahead and pop that in the chat a little bit later as well. There's also some documentation required when you're submitting your application, things like a pastoral reference and some ID. So once we've received your application and your documents, you'll have a new student interview with either myself or one of our other trainers. And during this time, we'll also discuss selecting your units and enrolling in them as well. But once an application has been approved, you would receive an official letter of offer and acceptance that you would be able to accept to become a student at the college. We then have an orientation for new students at the beginning of each semester for you to attend and be informed about getting started on your study journey with us. Now, please know that you don't need to remember all of this today. Once you submit an application, we'll email you with next steps and be here to help you throughout the process as well. So applications for our next intake are now open and they're due on the 30th of January, and our semester one next year will be commencing on the 15th of February. Now for a quick note on fees. The great thing about our vet fees is that you don't need to pay for the whole course up front. Usually students are invoiced semester by semester or by using a payment plan. So we don't have vet fee help available, but for some of our courses we do have a funding which is called Skills First funding. And I'd be happy to chat with you more about that if you're interested in one of these courses. The great thing Jude mentioned earlier as well is that these fees are significantly cheaper than looking at other degrees fees. So if you're looking at kind of a stepping stone course or something that will accredit you to be a chaplain or an education support worker, we would encourage you to make that investment. Okay, so just put those links in the chat in a moment. As we kind of head towards the end of our time, we're moving into a time for questions. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat box now. We have one question that we've kind of covered, but if we want to touch on again, maybe Jude, if you wanted to cover this one. What specific further study does VET lead to?
It depends which VET course you actually do, but certainly if you do the Certificate 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology, that can lead on to doing a Bachelor of Theology, or, as I said, the Diploma of Arts. We have there would be credit transfer arrangements for most courses. So, for example, if you've done the Certificate 4 in Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care, I would imagine that there might be some credit transfer into our Bachelor of Social Science. We actually had a student at the moment who was finishing, and I said, well, they could start and get credit backwards. So you can do part of VET and then start your diploma and get credit in that way as well without completing VET. So it can go in both directions. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting that it's so flexible in that way as well. I actually myself completed a VET diploma and then went on to complete a bachelor degree and was able to get some credit from that VET diploma towards my Bachelor of Theology as well. So highly recommend from a previous student. So another question we have is somebody's asking about the face-to-face classes for the chaplaincy course, Neil. Are these available by Zoom? And kind of what is the opportunities for somebody living in a regional area to be doing that chaplaincy course with us? We do have the on-campus units are spread out throughout the year. So I believe it's a maximum of 10 days that you would be required on campus for the whole year. And usually those classes are kind of clustered together. So there might be a Thursday and a Friday that you come to class on campus, and then you don't come again for a couple of months. But Neil, did you want to make a comment on some of those options for regional students?
Yes, Daisy. I think the key thing is that for whoever has that question, just come and have a discussion with it, and we'll look at your particular circumstances and work out what's going to work for you, whether you can come to some classes and not others, whether we do a little bit of recording. We just need to sit down and discuss what's going to work for you. And we've had many situations like this before, and we've always been able to come to a mutually satisfactory solution. So just have a chat to us and we'll work something out.
Great, thanks Neil. We've got a question here on the Certificate 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology. So I might hand this one over to Stephen. The question is around, do I need to have a lot of previous kind of Bible knowledge to come and do this course? Someone's maybe just come to faith in the last few years. Is this the kind of course that would be good for them?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think this course is suited for a young Christian, someone that's just coming to terms with the Bible and what it means to follow Jesus. So yeah, there's not a lot of expectation in terms of what knowledge someone already comes with. And yeah, we can take that on board depending on where each and every student's at in their journey. But I think this is a really good place to begin theological studies, particularly for a young or a new Christian. And maybe related to that, it's also suited to those who perhaps aren't so strong in English. Because there aren't high academic requirements. Someone that for them perhaps English is a second language. I think this course is really well suited for them as well.
Fantastic, thanks Stephen. Really appreciate that. We just have one more question If you do have another question, please pop it through. But the last question we have for the moment is, can I do both the Cert 4 in Christian Ministry and Theology and the chaplaincy course? The answer is yes, you definitely can. We have a couple of students that are actually doing that at the moment. So they've come and completed one course with us, the chaplaincy course, and have done a couple of the Christian Ministry and Theology units as electives, decided they wanted to complete the course. And like we were talking about before with the credit, those go as electives towards that course. And then there's just a few other Christian Ministry and Theology units to do, and you've completed both courses. So that's definitely an option there. Well, we don't have any other questions, so we're finishing a little bit early, but it does conclude our VET Eastern Information Night. So we do trust that you found the session helpful, and we do look forward to chatting with you further about best course options to suit your study needs. So please don't hesitate to contact us to make a time. If you're interested in finding out more about our other higher education courses, so diploma, bachelor through to master's degrees, please join us tomorrow evening for our final webinar this week. The link for more information and to register will pop in the chat just now. And finally, please know that we have prayed for you, and we are praying for you as you consider what the Lord has for you next. And we'd love to be in touch with you. So God bless you. Have a lovely evening.